Has anyone else heard the myth, or potentially fact, we're about to find out, of if you breastfeed your child, you are going to ruin your boobs? Well, I heard this so much throughout my journey into new motherhood where breastfeeding was happening. And because I heard it so much, so devoutly through everyone, I thought it must be true that breastfeeding ruins your boobs. Now, here I am at the end of my journey of breastfeeding, and I'm not going to tell you what happened to mine until the end. However, I had to look into it because I just wasn't sure that what I was hearing actually was the truth. So I looked into it, and if you're curious if breastfeeding will ruin your boobs, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. So you might be at the beginning of your journey in pregnancy, perhaps, and thinking, I am going to breastfeed my child. It is well known that it is the best nutrients. It is the best start that you can give to your child. If you are able to breastfeed, you should breastfeed. It is the body's natural way of sustaining a life, and there are just countless good things said about breastfeeding. However, there is the concern of, if I'm going to do this, is this going to catastrophically change my body forever? And I mean, that might not be a concern for you, although it is a question that is around, that I've heard so much of people saying, oh, if you're going to breastfeed, you're in for saggy tits, that kind of a comment. Anyways, I looked into the information. So starting it right off with a publication from Oxford Academic from 2008, they did a study on breastfeeding and breast aesthetics. And the information was they had 93 participants that were in for pre-op consultation for breast augmentation surgery, which is a fancy word for a boob job. Now, 54 participants reported a history of breastfeeding. So, just over half, about 60%. And the mean age of these women was all 41 years old. They noted that an adverse change was reported to them by 55% of that 60%. So 51 of the 93 participants said that they noticed a change in the look of their boobs after breastfeeding. Now, they went over all of the different factors, not just breastfeeding, and they said that they determined age, if you're older and you're aging, bra size going into pregnancy and breastfeeding, smoking, history of smoking, and how many pregnancies you have had, as well as body mass index being higher, so a higher BMI, heavier weight, were all identified as risk factors. Now, what did I miss there? I didn't hear breastfeeding for a risk factor for ptosis, which is the medical term for drooping. Breastfeeding was not found to be a factor in the look of boobs for drooping. Interesting. So why does everybody say that? That didn't make any sense to me. So I went on to reading a whole bunch of articles that were not medical publications, but they were real women's thoughts. I read all of these articles of how women have noticed a change in their breasts from breastfeeding. And like I said, they noticed a change. They did not notice a negative or positive change. It was just a change. So the changes were literally all over the map. Some women noticed that they had bigger, perkier boobs. Some women noticed that they had larger nipples or smaller size nipples after breastfeeding. Some women noticed that, hey, I had stretch marks during pregnancy and that followed me into postpartum, of course, and now my boobs have a different appearance altogether. I did find 2 comments where the women said, my boobs are exactly the same in proportion to how I have changed after having children. Meaning if they were heavier before and they had lost weight, their boobs had changed proportionally. That's the Cole's notes on their comments. So, yes, you will have many changes up to when breastfeeding is done, though from what I have found, your boobs go back to how they were pre-pregnancy. So you get back into that stage, and that takes, from what I have read, up to 14 months. So it can take over a year for your body to kind of reconfigure everything, because an interesting thing that I read that I'm going to get into, a total side note publication here, which was fascinating, was what happens when you're done breastfeeding. So I never really thought about it at an anatomical level of you're done breastfeeding. So then one day you just see your baby and you guys smile at each other and you are no longer breastfeeding your baby, but you still have milk being produced in your chest. So what happens to that? Where does it go? Well, what I found was the University of Manchester in 2016 looked at post-breastfeeding tissue remodeling, and they explained by this new research that there's a protein called RAC1 that is responsible for cellular switches that clear out the post-lactating residual cells and the residual milk, helping to reshape the breasts to post-breastfeeding / non-pregnancy state. Now, originally, it was thought that it was phagocytosis. So originally, all the publications had said, when you were done breastfeeding, think of cells eating other cells and discarding of them was the original thought of when you were done lactating, when you were done nursing your baby, your milk-producing cells get cannibalized by other cells and discarded of, and that's that. Now, this publication was done because some researchers looked at that and said that doesn't make any sense, because if it was phagocytosis, that comes with inflammation, that comes with pain, that comes with all of these residual effects that nobody reports. So what's actually going on in there? And they found that this protein, RAC1, was responsible for this cellular switch. And like I said before, it can take over a year. It takes a very long time for this remodeling process to happen to get your breasts back into that non-pregnancy state that they were before. Total side note, but just fascinating. Now, before I get on to what actually does change your boobs, because there is something, it's not breastfeeding, but there is something to do with the whole process of creating a child that causes a change to your breasts. Before I get into that, I wanted to put in a fun fact. So fun fact, small boobies can produce more milk than big boobies. This is a total myth that if you have big honkin' breasts, you are going to be producing like gallons and gallons of milk a day. That is not necessarily true, because some women, there's nothing there. And you're like, what's happening there? But no, the baby is actually still getting milk. It doesn't have to do with the size of the breasts, because keep in mind, breasts are made out of fat. So they're not made out of muscle, they're made out of fat. So does fat produce milk? No, mammary glands do. And that can vary drastically in women, and it does vary drastically in women, irregardless of the size of their breasts. Fascinating, right? Now, the reason I found this out was in a conversation with my husband, but on a side note, I found this out because I'm not a massive chested woman. I never have been. And I remember thinking, how am I going to produce enough milk for these kids? And the milk that you are able to produce through pumping or even just from breastfeeding a child is incredible. And I thought, how is my body doing that? Like, where is the milk? I don't see these big honking boobies, so where's the milk? And anyways, long story short, that is how I found out about this cool fun fact. I just wanted to share that with you. If you are going into your breastfeeding journey and you don't have big boobies, or maybe you have big boobies and you were thinking, I'm going to be set for breastfeeding, and maybe it's not working out like that, and maybe you're having trouble with creating the milk, it is not to do with the size of your breasts. It is to do with what is happening underneath. So if that kind of helps you in your understanding, I hope it does. Super fun fact, if nothing else. Now, what changes your boobs? Finally, I'm getting to it. A publication by Jane Leonard, which was medically reviewed by Deborah Sullivan in 2019, said that pregnancy, not breastfeeding, causes the most change to breasts. They said some may be small, large, droop, sag, the stretch marks, everything. Every woman has a different shape change permanently due to engorgement. So when your breast milk comes in, engorgement kicks in, which is basically your body's going, hey, I am now starting to produce milk, and you get exactly like the word says, engorged. You just get these massive, giant boobs. Even for me, for being a small person, they get, looks like you've had a boob job, boobs. That process, which lasts, a few days of when you're getting used to feeding your baby, you guys are getting on a schedule, your milk is coming in, you are engorged. That is what changes your breasts permanently. Now, even if you do not breastfeed, your milk is still going to come in. That is still going to happen to you. And you're still going to have to deal with engorgement until you send the signals to your body that you're not breastfeeding, and that goes away. Now, how does engorgement change your breasts permanently? Well, your breasts, if you look up the anatomy, are held by ligaments on your chest. And when you are engorged, those ligaments stretch. And as you may or may not know, some ligaments never come back from that. Depends on how delicate they are. It depends on so many different factors. But that will cause a change in your breasts sagging. As you age, those ligaments start to stretch out. Like that initial study from Oxford Academic that I mentioned, they said age was a big factor. Bra size, meaning if you have bigger, heavier boobs, you're pulling more on those ligaments. You're going to have more stretch factor. More pregnancies, like they said. That means more engorgement, more change. Smoking, I don't know how smoking affects it, but that's a whole nother thing. BMI being higher, that just means you're heavier. What are boobs made of? Fat, which means you have more weight there, bigger boobies, more sagging. So kind of get the picture. It's all those other factors. Mainly though, it's going to be pregnancy that gets you, and you cannot get away from it even if you are not breastfeeding. Now that I've said that news, what the heck can you do about it? What does it mean? Well, knowing that this change is coming down the pipeline, and maybe that is a big focus for you, and this is something that you want to get ahead of and get your research and get your confidence in. Well, there are so many things that you can do, from minimally invasive to very highly invasive. So minimally invasive, you can do things like a PRP vampire breast lift. PRP is platelet-rich plasma. It is basically going and getting your blood drawn by a professional, a nurse, a doctor. In a professional clinic, don't let someone do this in a basement. They put your blood into a centrifuge, they pull out the plasma, and they re-inject that back into the areas that are looking for regeneration. You can do things like radiofrequency, which is exactly what it sounds like. There are also some forms of laser that help with regenerating and tightening skin and tissue. Now, the next level up, there is something called a breast lift, not a breast implant, but a breast lift. That is, the medical term is mastopexy. Basically, they put a small incision in to lift the ligament. They will move your nipple to realign it, and they will remove any excess tissue and skin, if that's something that you're looking for. And then the next level up from that, getting into that highly invasive, you can go in and get a breast augmentation. You can get breast implants and completely change your look. Now, regardless of breastfeeding, your boobs are going to change. It is so comforting to know that going in, that there's going to be changes to your body. After you've had more than one child, you realize, yeah, I am just waiting here to see what happens to my body, because there's so many things that, you turn around, you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, wow, didn't know that was going to happen. And so this episode was truly just to get through the myth of everyone saying breastfeeding causes your boobs to sag. And the reason I started this off with saying my own journey, I didn't notice that. And I've breastfed 3 kids. And I mean, if you think about it, you're not breastfeeding a Hoover vacuum. Like it's not supposed to be an aggressive process. It is something delicate. What is more aggressive is the weight that you carry in that chest, the engorgement that's going to pull on those ligaments. So ending it at that, yes, there are changes that happen. No, they are not due to breastfeeding. There are so many things that you can do about it. Rewind in this episode if you want to go back and research those different things and see what maybe is right for you, or you can do absolutely nothing and c'est la vie and be great. I hope you got something from this episode. I had a lot of fun looking into this one because, yeah, it just didn't make any sense. And now it all makes sense. So thank you guys for joining me today. If nobody's told you, you're just absolutely killing it. As a mom, you're doing great. You're keeping humans alive. You are keeping yourself healthy and focusing on things that better you. You're doing awesome. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for joining me. Bye.